You are now listening to the E-Watchman Podcast with your host, Robert King.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Jehovah's Watchmen. I believe this is episode number 83, recorded in, let's call it the last week of January 2021. The inauguration of the new president took place a couple of days ago, and it went off uneventfully. I was expecting maybe some sort of intervention to undo the fraudulent election result. But I don't know if it's over yet or not. There's, some of the bloggers and podcasters out there saying that somehow the military has been empowered. And there may be something to that. It's virtually impossible to know for certain until something happens. But there was an article, even in the mainstream media, that the Pentagon is not cooperating with the new president. It's not giving him the latest intelligence of what's going on in their operations around the world. And, that's not a good omen for a president, not to have the military cooperating with him. And, so many times in third world countries that the military performs a coup, and they got the guns, and they just go in and take out who's ever president or prime minister or whatever, and maybe they shoot him, maybe they don't, but they call it regime change. So we're living in a very strange and perilous time, I believe. We know what the game plan is. The British have, I say the British, some call it the globalists, the bankers, but the financial system is run out of the city of London. So they've let it be known that there's going to be a great reset. And it's interesting, one of the last things Donald Trump did before he vacated the White House, he signed an executive order and made it illegal for the banks to deny credit to any worthy company in the United States. And that was an act intended to go against this policy of the new Green Deal. It hasn't been fully implemented yet, but all the big banks have agreed that they're going to cut off credit to any company that produces what they call greenhouse gases. And it's a thinly disguised effort to really eliminate a large portion of the population. So Trump knows what that game is, and he tried to prevent it with this executive order. I don't know how. It could probably easily be overturned now with a new president. But that's the situation with this new Green Deal. They know that this entire debt-blown financial system cannot last much longer. Apparently they know that. So this great reset is a way for them to stay on top of the heap and try to do a controlled collapse. So anyway, that's really where we are. And they wanted to make sure that the man who was running the most powerful country in the world was someone who was on board with them. And Trump apparently was not. I don't know, my dog is barking at something there. But, anyway, Trump withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord, which was to bring about basically the same thing as this new Green Deal. And the new president, Biden, said that day one he's going to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord. So anyway, it's good reason to stay awake spiritually, because we're in a zone there where anything can happen. One day you'll just wake up and the world will have changed. And we're hoping for a change, aren't we? We want a change. We want God to intervene, even though we'll have to go through some pretty difficult times. We know when the smoke clears that the kingdom will be ruling, and there'll be a new world, a new heavens, and a new earth, the Bible calls it. Now, some have asked about the chronology of the 1,260 days and 42 months and all of that. I may, in the past, I may have made comments that or implied that was the length of the tribulation. I don't remember writing or saying anything like that. I don't think that is the case at all. When we consider the Great Tribulation, Jesus said nothing like it has occurred before, and nothing like it will ever occur again. And if God did not intervene, no flesh would be saved. Well, we know that the nations have these horrific weapons, and they can literally destroy all life on Earth many times over. They can leave this beautiful blue planet just a radioactive charred cinder. It's unbelievable, the power that is in the hands of a few men. So it is very unlikely that the tribulation would last for 3.5 years, or like the evangelicals, they talk about a 7-year tribulation. Well, World War II was the worst, most horrific war to date, anyway, and it lasted about 6 years, and counting from the time that Germany invaded Poland in 1939. I think it was September 1939, and of course ended in 1945. And they didn't have nuclear weapons then. In fact, they were just invented. They were working on it, of course, during World War II. And then 2 atomic weapons were exploded over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, that abruptly ended the war. But now it's a completely different thing. So God cutting short the tribulation on account of his chosen ones, Jesus said, means that there is a post-tribulation period. Let's go to the Bible. The first indication or reference to the chronology that we're talking about is in the 7th chapter of Daniel. And the angel was explaining to Daniel that there's this ferocious beast, and he has iron teeth and copper claws, and a little horn comes up on his head among 10 other horns. And this little horn gets larger, and he plucks up 3 of the other horns. And he begins speaking words against Jehovah, against the Most High. And he will harass the holy ones, it says. And he will intend to change times and law. And they, that is the holy ones, will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the prophecy goes on to say that God will intervene. It says the court sat and they took away his rulership in order to annihilate him and to destroy him completely. And the kingdom and the rulership and the grandeur of the kingdoms under all the heavens were given to the people who are the holy ones of the Supreme One. So this time, times, and half a time. We know that Revelation and Daniel are really complementary. and they use a lot of the same symbolism. And the 12th chapter of Revelation speaks of this time, times, and half a time. And it begins after Satan and the demons are cast down from heaven. And, the Bible there says that woe for the earth, because the devil has come down to you having great anger, knowing that he has a short period of time. Well, how does the devil know that? He reads the Bible, right? So he's hurled down, and it says the dragon saw that it had been hurled down, and it persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the 2 wings of the great eagle were given to the woman so that she might fly into the wilderness to her place where she is fed for a time and times and half a time away from the face of the serpent. Interesting, huh? Up in verse 6, we know that the Bible interprets itself. And the Watchtower is really aware of this. In verse 6, it says, the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God where they would feed her 1,260 days. So this time, and half a time is 1,260 days. And it begins when Satan is hurled down. So he coming down in great anger, he provokes all of this chaos on the earth as a way to destroy those who belong to God. There is a war, obviously. It began back in the Garden of Eden, and we've gone through periods where there hasn't been a lot of direct fighting, and the world just seems to go on. But when Jehovah acts, then Satan responds, and vice versa. And when Jesus was on the earth, the demons were quite active to tempt him, to ensnare him, to try to kill him. They tried to kill him, the Jews. I mean, obviously the demons were using people. They tried to kill him on many occasions, but it was not time until it was time. Right? And of course, the apostles and disciples were bitterly persecuted. Many of them were killed. The war really heated up, didn't it? And then we went through hundreds of years where Jehovah wasn't doing much until this past century. The Bible students came on the scene, and here we see this conflict arising again because Jehovah was anointing people to be part of this kingdom that is going to replace Satan's kingdom. And so Satan is opposed to that he's the opposer, the enemy, the adversary. But when he's thrown down from heaven, we go into the hot war phase, big time, right? Christ will be ruling, but so will Satan for that period, 1,260 days. That same cryptic time period is mentioned again in the 12th chapter of Daniel. Chronology doesn't help us if we don't have a fixed point to begin counting, right? So in the 12th chapter of Daniel, the angel says that it will be for an appointed time, appointed times, plural, and a half time. Time, 2 times, and a half time. There's your 3.5 times. 42 months, again, 1,260 days. As soon as the dashing to pieces of the power of the holy ones comes to an end, all these things will come to their finish. In other words, that's it. Prophecy fulfilled as far as pointing to the coming of the kingdom. Satan's world will be finished off. Christ will be in complete control. And Daniel says, now, as for me, I heard, but I could not understand. So I said, "Oh, my Lord, what will the outcome of these things be?" And he says, "Go, Daniel, because the words are to be kept secret and sealed up until the time of the end. Many will cleanse themselves and whiten themselves and be refined, and the wicked ones will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand. But those having insight will understand." Okay? Now, verse 11. "From the time that the constant feature has been removed, and the disgusting thing that causes desolation has been put in place, there will be 1,290 days." Well, that's 30 days more than the 1,260. Verse 12, "Happy is the one who keeps in expectation and who arrives at the 1,335 days. So there's another related time period. And then the book closes out, "But as for you, go to the end, you will rest, but you will stand up for your lot at the end of the days." So we have a beginning point here. The clock will start ticking from the time that the constant feature has been removed and the disgusting thing that causes desolation has been put in place. So Jesus spoke about that, didn't he? He said that there would, when you see the disgusting thing standing in a holy place, and then he connected that with the Great Tribulation. But that's not to imply that the tribulation will last that entire time. As I said, it's some people have said that, World War III will be over in, 20 minutes. And of course, that's an exaggeration. But again, with the tremendous military capacity that exists, it's hard to imagine it going on for years. But Jehovah has a work for his witnesses. So sometime after the tribulation, Christ will reveal himself to the chosen ones. The last verse in chapter 12 of Revelation says, "The dragon became enraged at the woman and went off to wage war with the remaining ones of her offspring," the remnant, okay, "who observe the commandments of God and have the work of bearing witness concerning Jesus." Well, Jehovah's Witnesses will say, that's what we've been doing. We've been bearing witness. We've been preaching for, over 100 years. And that's true. But there is a different sort of witnessing. And again, we go to the 11th chapter of Revelation. It mentions this exact same time period. And it enlarges upon it. It says they will trample on the holy city for 42 months. Didn't Jesus say in the 21st chapter of Luke that the Gentile nations will trample on the city until the appointed times of the Gentiles is expired? So here we have it, 42 months that Christ's interest, his congregation, his kingdom expressed on the earth will be persecuted and under siege by Satan. But verse 3, it says, "I will cause my two witnesses to prophesy for 1,260 days dressed in sackcloth." And these are symbolized by the two olive trees and the two lampstands, and are standing before the Lord of the earth. Has Jesus always been the Lord of the earth? Well, after his resurrection, he said, "All authority has been given me on heaven and earth," over heaven and earth, rather. And but when he returns, when Jesus returns, then he lays claim to ruling over the earth. That's what is presented in the 10th chapter of Revelation. a strong angel descending from heaven, arrayed with a cloud, and a rainbow is on his head, and his face was like the sun, like Jesus was in the Transfiguration. And it goes on to say, he set his right foot on the sea, but his left one on the earth. In other words, Jesus standing astride the earth and the sea, establishing his dominion. This is mine. I rule. Right? So the two witnesses are standing before the Lord of the earth. He's also standing before them, right? That's what took place in the Transfiguration, right? These two witnesses are described doing things that Moses and Elijah did. Elijah called down fire from heaven, you recall, with the challenge with the prophets of Baal. And it says they have authority to turn the waters into blood. That's what Moses did. They can strike the earth with every sort of plague as often as they wish. Well, that's what Moses did with the 10 plagues on Egypt. So these two witnesses witness Jesus. Moses and Elijah were with Jesus in the Transfiguration vision. And the apostles, 3 of them anyway, saw it. They were witnesses to this Transfiguration, which Peter later said had to do with the presence, the parousia of Christ. So the witnessing that is to be done is not, what Jehovah's Witnesses have been doing up to now, even assuming that what they're doing now is considered witnessing. No, but after this tribulation, then these two witnesses have the work of declaring that they've seen Jesus, that Jesus is ruling. And then it says of these two witnesses that they're killed. Well, the Watchtower has quite an elaborate fairy tale of how this was all fulfilled back during World War I, that somehow the Bible students were symbolically killed and resurrected. And yeah. Well, what did it say back in Daniel? Seal up the book until the time of the end. If the time of the end has not begun, you can't understand all this stuff. The Watchtower claims it's begun, but it hasn't. And that's why they are forced to just make up, an elaborate, artfully contrived false story. But notice in verse 8, it talks about the death of these two witnesses. It says that their corpses will be on the main street of the great city that is in a spiritual sense called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was also executed on the stake. Now, I ask you, did Jesus die a symbolic death? No. No, we know he was executed, actually, by the king of the north at that time, the Roman Empire. So the death of these two witnesses is not symbolic. And that's what Daniel's talking about. This beast is allowed to wage war and conquer and finish off the holy ones. Jehovah protects them during their 3.5-year ministry and giving witness, and then Satan literally kills them. Now, going back to the 12th chapter and these different time periods, you're going to be disappointed with me because I'm going to say, I don't know. But it is interesting, that there were similar time periods when Jesus was executed on the stake. Of course, he was in the grave for 3.5, or parts of 3 days, I should say. And then he appeared to his disciples for 40 days, and then he ascended. And then 50 days from the Holy Spirit was poured out. So, there may be, like, from the time the last anointed person is put to death, there may be this 40, 50-day period before Armageddon. And that's as happy as the one who keeps in expectation and arrives at the 1,335 days. So we are going to find out. I'm certain of that. And it's good exhortation to keep in expectation. Well, someone had also asked me how this peace and security ties in. And, Jehovah's Witnesses are under the impression that peace, whenever they're saying peace and security, the sudden destruction that comes is Armageddon. But I've spoken about this and written about it somewhat, that Paul was speaking about the parousia. And, he said that this would come upon them as a thief in the night, whenever they're saying peace and security. So Jesus said he was coming as a thief. So I am under the impression that the Great Tribulation will, or the nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom, will explode whenever they are saying peace and security. I was expecting Donald Trump to do something in the Middle East because he'd been working on it his whole time as president. And Israel made several peace agreements with Arab countries. So I don't know if the military does what some people think is going to happen and Trump finishes up his work. It'd be interesting to see. And then, the king of the north will storm and flood over. That would coincide with their saying peace and security. Anyway, interesting times, my friends. And that's going to do it for me. My voice is giving out on me. And but we'll talk to you again. Thanks for listening.